You are live now. Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope that you are doing amazing wherever you are. If you guys have noticed, my Hawks is back, and I am delighted to see that he is visiting me these days. He always brings so much joy to me. Did you guys watch that probably Meshad has put it already on my story, that my Red Hawks was visiting me a couple of days ago, and he started chatting with me, and as soon as I ran to get my phone to film him, he got upset and he flew away. He doesn't want to be highlighted and be in my film. He just want to have one-on-one soul connection. What do you think about that, guys? Yeah. So oftentimes, guys, we think that everyone wants to be under the projections of light and being seen, but not my Hawks. And why is that? Basically because the Hawks are so aware and they have so much knowledge. They have been working on their egos for many, many years. So they just are not needing anything. They just show up sometimes as our spirit guides to have a chat. So I filmed him again today, but I asked him if I had permission. Today he was better with filming, so I filmed him, and probably soon you guys are gonna see him. Anyway, welcome everybody. Happy Thursday. And today I'm doing a joint live with dear Allison. You guys met him last week. And we're going to talk about phobia to really cover our fears and our phobias. And these days I have realized that the more I'm aware, the more I realize how I have to be really careful with this thinking machine. And if we're not careful, is just gonna grab our attention, it's gonna grab our awareness, and it's just gonna be all over the place. So how to contain our thoughts, it's a whole journey on itself. So tell me, where are you guys joining me from? Tell me, guys. I'm blessed to be living in Los Angeles, and where I'm living right now, it's much, much cooler. But I have been talking to people from different neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and their areas are really, really hot. So I'm glad that I have the breeze going here and it's kind of cool. But either way, I always love spring and summers. These are my two favorite seasons of all. Where are you guys from? Okay, Masa is from Iran. Welcome, welcome live. Asiya, where are you from? Hello and welcome. Hello, Zore. Welcome, Nahid. We know Zore is from Sweden. Hi, Shukufajan, where are you joining me from? And tell me, guys, are you experiencing some phobias and some fear these days? And I noticed something, guys. When we are exposed into too much information, and especially I did a live while back about the Matrix, Washington, D.C. Hi, Susan. Miss you, Susan. Yeah. So it's been my experience that when I'm too much exposed with social media, it doesn't matter if it's Instagram or Facebook, maybe not Facebook that much, but what other social media am I talking about? Clubhouse and blah, blah, blah. I have always been a YouTuber. I love YouTube because you really can get really good content to listen to, and it's not so much distractions. But anyhow, I have noticed that when we're getting too much information, somehow we become more anxious. And you know, they did a study a few years back that people who are spending a lot of time on social media are experiencing depression. What do you think about that? So I'm trying to kind of, because my job is somehow I have to be on social media, I'm trying to be very mindful and cut back more and more from social media, actually as much as I can. So these days, I told you, was it last week that I went on hiking with Jeff? And I told you that I'm working on myself to get to a deeper inner listening. So I'm trying to silence as much as I can around me what's going on. So I'm embracing silence, quietness. I used to be like listening on something before from YouTube or something while I was cooking or cleaning and all that. But now I have decided that I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to be fully present when I'm washing dishes, when I'm cooking, when I'm doing any kind of task, just to concentrate on that, what I'm doing. So as you guys know, when we are cleaning up the house, it's not very, at least for me, I don't love to clean up my house. But when I was doing it, I would listen to something, so that would help me to get some of my attention to be doing a better job. So I wouldn't get so bored of cleaning the house. You probably have the same experience that you see that when we want to do housework or cooking or something, we're kind of listen to something that is really interesting, and we just think that this will make the task, whatever it is that we're doing, much more interesting. So as I'm trying to work on myself, I'm also pushing myself a little more, if you know what I mean. It's like less work, less doing, and being more in the present moment. Just if we can call it meditation or anything that we're kind of doing. So when I went on hiking with Jeff, I told you guys I'm getting myself kind of ready to be reaching a higher state of consciousness. And I believe that happens by being alone, spending a lot of time in silence, and cut out all the other distractions. So that's my goal. Tell me, what do you guys think? How are you spending your days these days? Are you still spending a lot of time on social media, or have you stopped that? Let me see, guys. I'm gonna check for Allison. Oh, there she is. She did request, but I got her. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Alison.
Good day, Sudi, and good day, everybody. It's lovely to be back, and you're looking amazing today. It looks beautiful where you are.
Thank you so much. I didn't see you, Alison. I was just rambling off because I was waiting.
It wasn't rambling, and the more time, ironically, or as the universe would say, I'm finding more time in stillness is really helping me at the moment. There's a lot of noise and there's a lot of things, and I'm just finding it helpful for me. It's enhancing my meditation. Like you said, even driving to an appointment today, I turned the radio off, and I'm just finding those extra moments that we get in the day and that stillness, and I'm finding it really beneficial. Everybody needs to find their own way, but it is absolutely, this is something I'm doing a lot more of at the moment.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine. We did a joint live a couple of days ago, and he called me up all of a sudden and he said, you know, my shoulder is really hurting, and can you work on my shoulder, do some healings? And he's all about the brain these days, right? I said, and you believe in this, the healing and all that? He said, yeah, it's not that I don't believe in it. So I told him, I said, just lay down wherever you can. As we were going on, because I was entering his zone, there were so many things that were coming up, and I was just telling him what I was hearing and what I was sensing and feeling. And one of them was the aggravation. I said, you're very aggravated or irritated. And he said, I don't know. He kept coming from the mind. I said, get out of your mind. This is not something that you can comprehend from the mind. Come from a heart space. And then he said, yeah, it could be the heat, because especially where he lives is very hot. It's like 100 and something degrees. He said, yeah, and he hates warm weather. He said, yeah, maybe because it's so hot, I get aggravated. And I said, or my spirit said that, how about if you change the meaning that you're giving it to the weather? What if you change the meaning and tell yourself that this heat is just so amazing because it's bringing your body temperature up, and you start sweating and your lymphatic system gets to clean up and all of that? And he says, oh yeah. I said, well, if we are working so much on our mind and we believe that everything is created in the mind, so what if we change the meaning and make this hit like the best thing that's happening right now, and how it's warming up our soul and our heart and all of these things? So that was a part that I just clicked in, that in the moment that we feel irritated, how fast and quickly do we catch ourselves and realize that this is where I need to be fully mindful and see how I can transform and change this feeling to something else.
I would fully agree. One of the first steps I encourage in my clients is having that body awareness. If we start with that awareness, because as we've just identified, we spend too much time being busy. We're in this maelstrom all day, and we're not actually listening to our bodies. But once we just take that step back, that's the first indication that we've got, that we can have, with that an awareness, we can then have more of an understanding of our emotional state as well. So yes, I would definitely encourage that. And sit into our bodies are very intuitive, but because of everything that's going on, and sometimes that can be uncomfortable. You know, we're not happy sometimes, and it's understandable when we get uncomfortable. It's a bit disconcerting. But if we learn to be okay with that, and then have, like you say, change your perceptions of that reality, that's a really beautiful place to start. You and I, we have similar objectives and we can achieve similar outcomes. We might have different paths, but there's a huge synergy in terms of what we both do as well, which I'm finding absolutely fascinating. So yeah, I totally agree, Sudi.
Yeah, beautiful. So, Alison, before any further ado, let's dive into the topic of fear and phobia.
Yeah, there's a close correlation to them. And I think if we just take a step back as well, what I found when I was having a look at these for today, if we go back to the method of communication and how we take in information and how we filter that then affects our behaviors. So as I said, if we go back to that initial awareness, we take in unconsciously a huge amount of information, but how we filter that is through our beliefs, our memories, you know, and those things. So that is the filter that comes through, and then that starts to impact on everything else. So if we have a little bit broader understanding initially of communication, then we can see how that affects our state, our physiology, and then our behavior. We've just touched on our physiology earlier, having that understanding of our body, our energy, and that's a really good place to start with fear. Fear is natural, and what we need to understand is to bond with it and don't be dismissive of it, because if you look at the reasons for fear, ultimately that's about safety. It's our bodies are designed, it's a safety mechanism within us to keep us safe. So we need an awareness of it, as we've just identified, but then it's measuring that against everything else. So that internal filter that our communication goes through, it might then skew and push our fear dial up a little bit because there's something that's happened to us in the past that we might or may not be even aware of, but it's there within our system. So if we capture that at that first point, and there is the correlation between fear and phobia, I think is fear is natural, and that's fine, and we can. And the thing to give out to people that are listening is that you can have control over those things. You don't have to let it limit you and limit your life and limit your possibilities and your opportunities. But when it comes to over the other side of the spectrum with phobias, that's when it can be irrational is the word that would be used, because we might not have an understanding of why, you know, people might be afraid of thunder, they might be afraid of clowns, they might be afraid of something else. But it's really that phobia can have a really intense impact, and if not managed properly, as with a lot of things, that's when it gets really detrimental on our physical, emotional health and well-being. But both things, there are solutions out there, and they can be managed.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very well said. So let's say I have a phobia, because I've seen that a lot of people have phobias with snake, and I used to be one of them too. So if I have phobias about snake, how do we go about that?
That's a really interesting question. And what we have to do, especially from the point of NLP, we really have to look at something we call ecology. And that is looking at the impact. We all do it, but we have to look at the impact of what we're going to do. So we'd have to evaluate, if we took away, say, for example, your environment, in your home environment, snakes were part of that environment. If we took your phobia and your fear of snakes from about a 4 or a 5, and we did some work and that took that down to a 0, and you didn't have any fear of snakes, then what would happen? That's then putting you in danger, because that's overriding that natural sort of safety mechanism that we have. So depending where you are, so what we want is to get a balance of your fear of snakes so it's not life limiting, but it's also not then pushing you too far so you then perhaps were put in danger because you had no fear of snakes, if that made sense.
Mm-hmm. So can you get open the NLP a little bit more so we can learn the technique?
Yeah, there's a technique which we call, and as a caveat, what I would say, Sudi, is, again, going back to the ecology of everything, in terms of coaching, I would say, and I've done fairly limited work on phobias. It's not something that comes up in my, I've done it in my training. It's not something I've done in regular practice, but it's something I understand and I've done in a limited way. But what we'd have to do, again, is look at, as with you, it's the best outcome for your client. So if we evaluate the client and they're really got an extreme phobia, that could then be a trauma response. And that would mean potentially it would be better to have more of a therapeutic response rather than a coaching response.
Excuse me. Sorry.
That's okay. It's all right. I had a pneumatic drill over here the other day just when I started. This is what happened. So yeah, I think you need to do that. If you do that pre-frame and then assess where the client is. So going back to your question, what we would do is explore where the client is, how limiting that phobia is, whether it's snakes, etc. And then what we need to do is help and support the client. And how we do that, there is a specific technique, but it's called double dissociation. So what we're doing is removing the kinesthetics. That's part of that communication that we have. And if we remove and step back from the emotion, once we do that, so then we're also putting a client in a position of choice. We're giving the client choice. So then that really helps with that emotional state as well. So with the disassociation that happens, we're removing, because most people, when they describe getting into like a phobic state, that can be increased heart rate, it can be sweating, your physiology changes. And that's when we said about that awareness. We might know if it isn't snakes, people might have that reaction and are not entirely sure what that is. But what we need to do, and I would be interested to see how you deal with phobias in your realm, what we need to do is, like I say, put a few filters in essence between the client. So we're starting to adjust those thoughts and patterns and behaviors and making a distance from that. So there is an exercise that we would run that would successfully then, because we're distancing the client and they're looking at the situation objectively. And ironically, and it's an English thing, but we use humor with that as well, because within that exercise, we can't really, there's something deep within our sort of physiology. We can't fear something that we really find ridiculous and humorous as well. So that's part of that exercise. So we walk the client through those specific steps. And then what happens is that changes the client's perceptions, and it's giving them a different map of reality. So that, like I said, when we discussed the communication method, what we've actually done is just change that inner sort of workings and change that. It might be from a memory, an unconscious memory that somebody's had that's been buried quite deep and they're not aware. But what we've done is change how they are responding to that. We have to be really mindful, Sudi, that really serious phobias can, in essence, be really detrimental. They can cause cardiac arrest, etc. So people might think, sometimes people might be a little bit perhaps dismissive, if that's not too strong a word. But we really, what it comes down to is if it's inhibiting the client's quality of life, we can give them a further choice of how to be able to do that. And removing that fear in those responses. You mentioned snakes. I think one of the most recognized phobia is that of public speaking. So that can limit a person's choices in life. They may not want to go for a promotion at work They may not want to do various other things because our body is hardwired for safety, and that's what we naturally would prefer. But when that phobia kicks in, it can be really restrictive. You know, you've heard of claustrophobia. Agoraphobia is the fear, just wanting a level of safety, because the actual word phobia comes from the Greek word for horror or fear. That's where it initially comes from. So yes, there is an NLP technique that we can run, and that's what you would do. So you take the client through those, and you double disassociating the client. So there's 2 phases within that, and by then the client has put themselves in a different position. They've really distanced themselves from that emotion, that energy that kicks in, whether it's the dry mouth, the heightened heart rate, the sweating, the palpitations, tachycardia, all of those things that can be associated. And then we replace that with something else, and then the client doesn't have that perception of the phobia, and then they can move on and have a quality of life. It gives them more opportunity to do the things that they were restricted if that phobia was then present. Does that make sense, Sudi? Is that a clear explanation?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to know if we can break it down a little more. And when you say disassociation, how is that done technically?
How is it done? The exercise that I've been trained with, and there might be other exercises, what we do is get the client to imagine they're going to a movie theatre. So we give the client a golden ticket to go to the movie theatre, because we really know that our subconscious mind is really powerful. So we let the client go to a movie theatre. We let them sit in the theatre and let them look at themselves, project themselves onto the movie. So then that's when that first stage of disassociation starts. So they're seeing themselves in a movie. So what we would do is run a pattern to take them up to the point of where that fear was happening. So say, for example, you use snakes, but for a movie, if we're going to go at the movies and you've got your popcorn, so say that somebody's frightened of high wire. So we might say that they're in a movie, picture yourself, you know, walking on a high wire, but what we do is then stop them at the point. So then they're just looking at themselves on that high wire, but they're looking at it from a distance. And then that's that first disassociation. And then what we do is then we ask the client to go into the projection theatre, and then they can run that movie. But what we ask them to do, and again, this breaks that state and breaks the association, we ask them to run the movie, but we ask them to run the movie forwards and backwards. And we ask them to run the movie backwards because that builds in that second dissociation, running it backwards. And then if we throw in, you might not be familiar with, can you recall the Benny Hill theme?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, so when the client, and when you do this, so when we're running the movie backwards, we do it quicker and quicker, and then we ask them to put the theme music to their movie. So we get the Benny Hill movie and we're going backwards faster and faster, and sometimes the client will actually laugh at this point because it's then becoming, so that if they, whatever they felt, that energy and that emotion that they had before, now they're seeing it as ridiculous. So we run it back and back and back. They've got the Benny Hill movie, Keystone Cops, or whatever music they've, Looney Tunes, whichever music they've attached to it. And by doing that, we're breaking that. So then what we do is take the client back to the movie theatre, and to test it, we ask them to run that movie, and then because of that double disassociation, they then see that movie, but they're probably now hearing the Benny Hill theme music and just thinking, this is all a bit ridiculous, and now I feel fine. And we ask them how they feel and what their emotions are. And then usually that is one of the main exercises that I'm familiar with in terms of helping clients get rid of that phobia. It can be really successful, and what we're doing is putting the client in control of their emotions rather than their emotions controlling them. Because our inner world, as we said last week, colours our outer world. So what we're doing is giving them a different palette, and now they see the world differently. And if they do see snakes, they're going to be in a situation where they're delivering a speech, etc., that they're not going into that same state, and then it gives them a level of freedom. But like I said, Sudi, what I'd be mindful of is if the phobia was really intense and it was on a trauma level, that's when I would say that other interventions or other support, therapeutic or otherwise, would actually probably be needed at that point in time. But the one I've described to you, if we scale trauma and it was somewhere between sort of 1 to 5, then that technique that I've described would be really quite successful, hopefully, in helping that client get rid of that phobia, but also not taking fear away altogether. As I've said, we still need an element of fear because that's what keeps us safe. Otherwise, we'd just be walking over the road and then it wouldn't be a good outcome. So we still need to have that outer sort of awareness, but without that extra need for safety in certain environments and situations.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, as you said, Benahil, I was thinking about Mr. Beans, and also it used to be a British comedy in a really exclusive. I can't remember the name. One of the clothing store.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mr. Ben. Was it Mr. Ben? Mr. Ben. I never knew we'd get to Mr. Ben today. I love Mr. Ben because you could go in, you'd come out, you'd be an astronaut, you could be anything. And that's what we're doing. This is what I do today. Anybody can be anything they want. So there's a great parallel and a synergy to Mr. Ben as well. But yeah, I don't want to seem sort of flippant when we introduce that humour there, but there's a reason for that, and that is really breaking that pattern that is not serving us. That really helps to break that pattern and change the association. And that's why you can choose your own theme tune. It's your movie. You make up the movie, and then it works for you rather than working against you.
Yeah, this technique really works, Alison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we change the movie in the brain and making it funny and keep moving it fast forward and bringing it back, slowing it down, being really funny, and we keep watching it. So everyone, did you get what Alison says? The way she does her NLP, one of the ways that she works is that she takes you to a movie, and on a movie screen, you guys are watching yourself with your phobias and with your fears. And then you can make it really, really funny, like Mr. Beans or whoever it is. And now you're sitting outside in the movie theater and you're watching how funny this could be. What you're doing, actually, you're changing the meaning in your mind from fear-based into something that is funny and playful and all of that. And Alison, we're all are really lacking. Another things that I'm really trying to work on is this, we have lost our playfulness. We have become so dried out, and it's just like our mind is constantly laser focusing on things that are not good, and we're just getting deep and diving in. Like right now, a lot of things are happening. I don't know what they're showing you on the news in England, but a lot of things are happening in Iran. Demonstrations about lack of water and this and that, and now they're talking about cutting out the internet for people, so they're not going to be able to get on Instagrams or any other platforms. So so much is going on, and they keep asking me to, yeah, Maro, this would be great for kids too, especially for kids because they love funny things and playful things. That would be a great method. So anyhow, they're asking me a lot to talk about these things and talk to people about it. And I'm a little hesitant because there's so much more is going on. You know, we can take a look at this in so many different levels, from the collective consciousness of everyone who lives in Iran, from the karmic pattern, from the Akashic record, from so many ways to look at it. So I'm just kind of, it's because it's very delicate area to talk about, and there are so much politics behind it. So I'm just kind of moving back a little bit to really tune in and see. But I always think, Alison, that everything changes its meaning when we're looking at it from a different plane of consciousness, you know?
Yeah, we are, and I'm discovering this a lot more, Sudi, in terms of my own development. And when I say higher self, I'm getting more comfortable with the fact that it doesn't really matter certain things that are happening. And we go back to choice. We have a choice. And if things happen, like our interaction, how in essence would two people in terms of ourselves be brought together? But I didn't question that. Myself a couple of years ago would have probably done that. But now I know that there's a certain path that we're on, and that we will go that, and we will speak our truth. We might be say, you know, people might not like to have honest and truthful conversations, but we can do that because if we look at the intent of those conversations, that's to benefit people. And I understand your reservation about the fear. I'll say it sort of in a very broad context because I think it's global at this point in time. That fear is there for a reason. There's a societal reason why that fear is perpetuated, in my opinion. And that's why myself, we started our conversation about social media and the wider media, etc. I choose not to tune into that because it's not healthy for me. And that's my choice. That might not be how everybody else does it. But I get where you're coming from. But now I'm far more in my heart space, going with my gut, and that's how I'm operating myself. And if we encourage more people to broaden their experience, and it's about finding what works for you. We're not here to tell anybody what to do, because coaching from with my coaching hat on. Coaching is not directive, but I know the benefits that I'm finding by just being more intuitive and stepping away from what would be seen as being ego-driven, and just because that comes from a negative space. If we just broaden our own understanding, then it's like having another GPS system put in, and we've got a different point that we're going to, and that's how I'm seeing things at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking about this because we started. Are you on Telegram, Alison?
No.
Telegram is a platform that Iranian are using and is amazing. You should get on it because you can forward huge files with no problem. And now, one of my assistants here, Mersha, told me that on Telegram is just like they created this platform, just like Zoom, that you have audio call and video call, and you don't have to download or change it to any other platform. You can just send it, forward it, and it's really good. So, but because usually I'm doing my webinars from Zoom, since we got a lot of people joining the webinar, it's not safe for me to, I'm just kind of hesitant to try something. But I told them, I said, yes, I will do that. But anyhow, the point is, I have about 4,000 people on Telegram. We have a group that I have one of my students from 20 years ago. She's been following me all the way till now. She's running that, and they're doing meditation and mindfulness, and they keep doing like 3 months or 28 days challenges on doing this and that. So yesterday they sent me a lot of messages from different people who were thanking me, and they were grateful. For instance, I had this lady I listened to. She said, yes, I have been suffering with asthma and my lungs, and I couldn't sleep all night. I felt like I was choking for many, many years. And I'm not sure if she was living in Germany or Norway, or I'm not sure. But anyhow, she said, one day I watched Sudi's show, and she said, we humans should not be eating dairies. You should cut out dairies because dairies makes you congested, and it's this and this and that. So she said, one day I told myself, I have tried everything, the doctors examining the lungs and everything. They couldn't find out or come out with a solution why she was choking at night. And then she said, I told myself that I'm going to give this a try. And for 2 months, I didn't touch any dairies. And now I'm cured, and I'm feeling really good, and I sleep like a baby, and blah, blah, blah. And I heard many other people who left comments. They send it to me because they know I don't go there. I don't have time to go there. Anyhow, I listened to all of these, and I also talked to a friend of mine. He's a coach. And then he told me that someone that I have worked with previously, because we did a joint live, now she has been talking to him, and she said, I did a session with Sudi a while back, and I told her that I was suffering because I lost my daughter. And Sudi was telling me that I have a choice of looking at it from third dimension or coming from a higher dimension, which is more awareness, and look at all these things, how a soul can suffer from losing a loved one because we have attachment from the ego parts and all that. And when we're looking at it from a higher realm, you don't have a family. This is not your mother or your father. You don't, because it's only in the third dimension that this is my mother and this is my father, and they opening up all these apps with, codependency, guilt, shame, blah, blah, blah. But when we look at it from a higher dimension, it's like none of these would bother you. It's not about something doesn't bother us, but since we're looking at it from a different lens of view, we don't go to this manic depression and all these things. So my method obviously didn't work out for her. And we were having a chat, and he said that she is really depressed. She has manic depression, and she has to be on medication, right? So I often look at everything, and I'm thinking, okay, I told you last week I worked with 2 different ladies who were having cancers, right? I did the same method. We went through the same thing, and we find out what's the root cause, what are the lessons, and all this, because after all, I'm a spiritual counselor, right? So with these 2 different people, one of them, she was so blocked that she told me that she's fearful because I told her, let's go on with your chemotherapy, but also let's have this part too. Let's join both together. And she said to me, she said, oh, that's that your this statement is making me anxious because you didn't tell me that I'm just going to be healed and I don't have to take the other approach and that stuff. I said, well, first of all, legally I cannot do that. I have to, and our job is not to cut off the medical help and that stuff. Our work is to combine these two together and that stuff. But she was so blocked up, she didn't want to have anything to do with this. So she said she's just going to go strictly with chemotherapy before it's just the cancer take over all of her body and that stuff. So, but the other person, she was opened up to what I was talking to her about. And she said, yes, I will come up. She come to my webinar and she was like, do I have to get more sessions? I said, you can or you don't have to. But when you come from a higher consciousness, you understand that she got it, that this cancer is here to teach her something. And although she mentioned that she has been working with a few different shamans and she has done a few ayahuasca ceremonies, but the cancer is back. So I told her, I said, this is not about punishment. It's just about the lesson. Hasn't been learned. And this is the lesson. So, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, we cannot say like there's one approach that's going to fit all, but this all depends on people, like at what level do they want to work. And at the end, to me, is this decision is that, do I want to wake up or do I want to stay asleep? Because so many people, they just don't want to wake up and realize that this reality is not real. It's just our mind is just making it up. So I'm very much into seeing everything and see how we can come up with something that is more usable, some tools that is helpful, that is usable for people. But oftentimes, the part that is missing, every time that I do a session, I said, I have a small part here, which is I'm just going to speak the truth, and I'm going to tell you what's the underline, what's the lesson, what is it that you need to learn. But the bigger part is your job, that now you have to stick to the routine and daily doing the exercise that you don't really want to do, they're not fun or whatever. So it's the majority of it, of the coaching or healing, comes back again to the person who is doing it. And oftentimes people are not committed enough to do the daily practices because they have chosen to stay asleep, So, but coming back, did you want to say something?
No, I fully agree with you, Sudi. And these conversations, the more that people are listening, because it does take time for it's an osmosis that's occurring. And some people are opening up and some people aren't. But again, you and I, in terms of our work, what we do, we go back to choice. We're giving people a choice. And you're not being dismissive of anything. What you're doing is offering a complement to what's out there already. And you're giving people a different view and a different lens to look at things. But when we look at how society projects things, that's where that pushes that. This is why we need to demystify and really have honest and truthful conversations, because that will then bring about more truth. So the way that you're doing that, there's like a couple of layers to the work that you do. And just having those conversations that you are, that will really, it will start to pique people's interest and people will start to maybe look at things differently. And that's what needs to happen. If people, it's coaching is dealing with something invisible as well, because what we're doing is helping people and giving them, adjusting their emotional state. You can't physically see it, so that's why in a very similar context but probably very narrow, in a narrower way, people don't quite understand coaching sometimes. And that's why sometimes I'll say it's emotional magic. And I'm not being dismissive, because I love the coaching profession.
Yeah.
But as I said last week, we don't really understand electricity, but we see it and we switch the light on and it serves us. So it's about what's serving you. And if something in a traditional realm isn't serving you, then you might want to explore. And what you're doing is giving people a wider menu to choose from. And that's all you're doing. And you should be commended for that. So.
Thank you, Alison. So going back to the topic of our day,
Yes.
fear and phobia.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me earlier, how do I go about it? I'm going to tell you and see if this could be a useful tool. I take people into I always take them into a guided meditation and just ask them to close their eyes and relax their body and become fully present in their body, because oftentimes we notice that people are not really in their body. They're just everywhere, but
They're too much going in.
but not really here. So I just take them into sometimes different thing, whatever it shows up. Sometimes it's like I take them into under a rainbow shower, the 7 color of chakras, and you're just standing under this shower of purple and then blue and green and yellow and orange and all that. And then I take them into that fear, whatever it is. So I think for Mershad is, what is it, Mershad? What is your fear? I can't remember. It wasn't a lizard, was it, Mershad? So anyhow, let's go with the snake, because so many people have fear of snake. So while they're in that meditation and for instance they're taking these showers and that stuff, I said, look at the snake, and the snake is coming towards you and that stuff. And how do you feel? So usually it's fear, or I'm really scared and la 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 la. And then I tell them, I said, what's the meaning? If we could give a snake a meaning, what would be the meaning of it? And then whatever they come up with, which is usually not the positive point of the snake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, can we look at the snake under a different lens? And then I say, have you ever noticed that the logo of health are 2 snakes colliding in one another? Oh, yeah. And then I tell them, I said, do you know that many, many years ago, the kings, they always had underground, they always had a lot of snakes, because that was like prosperity and for health, and it takes the evil eyes from their castle and this and that. And then I'm bringing out all this positive point. Oh, do you know that the snake is just so much guidance and this and this? So we're changing this, and then I changed the feeling right there as they're into that. I said, now, remember I told you, did I tell you, Alison, when I was doing the ayahuasca, because I had a fear from snake too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly the snake came and I was afraid. Yeah. And then I heard this God voice like, what if this was God too? That
Mm-hmm.
was very powerful, because the minute I heard that, everything came down, even the purging. Like, you know how
Mm-hmm.
that taste is so awful. Oh my God, I have never tasted anything so bad. But you constantly have this feeling that you want to purge. And the minute I heard, what if this was God too? I just surrender totally. And as soon as I surrender, fully surrender to it, the purging went away, and I allowed this snake, and I looked at the snake as my spirit guide. So then the fear was gone. So this is the method that I work when I'm doing this. And when someone is going into a trance with this, starting with a guided meditation, we change the meaning, and I run it a few times. How do you feel, and how do you feel? And little by little, they, at first they're reluctant to do it, and then but they surrender to it, and they go. And then I go, like we do, back and forth, back and forth. How do you feel? Oh, I know it's okay. So do you think this can work, Alison?
I can, because again, I can see similarities in the NLP technique. And yet there are other techniques out there, like exposure. There's other ways to deal with it. I described an NLP technique. But what you're doing, again, is changing the meaning and changing the association. So once you're doing that on a conscious level, well, you're giving a new program for your client to actually operate from. So I can see a huge amount of, there's a lot of parallels in both of those. But again, if that's the client, as long as the outcome and the result is a positive one for the client, it's just giving them, it's like having a toolbox. There's a toolbox there, and the client can pick out which tool they want to use. But because your heart has guided us with mine, is we really hold that space for a client, and that's a huge gift, and it's a lot of trust. And once we do that, we are guided to get the best outcome for our clients. So whichever method, process, however they choose, as long as they are fit, they have more freedom, and then their restrictions on life that were imposed on them because of the fear or because of the phobia, if they've gone, then that's a beautiful thing, because then they're living a life at a higher level without that suppression that's been going on, because their life would have been quite restricted. Because if they're living in a position of fear, they're seeking that safety all that time, and that's really keeping them confined. And again, if a person wants to have that, and that's what they choose, but sometimes by not choosing change, we're making a choice. So again, we're giving them the opportunity, and people have to be in the right mindset for change, as you know. So, but no, the way you've described it, and you're giving a different meaning to it, and you're taking that fear away and you're replacing it with something else. So then the client is adjusting their thinking, because like I said, most of those, what we would call irrational fears, people probably might not even be aware of where that's come from. It's a memory, it's something that's happened, it's a belief, it's somewhere in their programming that's caused that. And you're just unraveling it, and you're just shining it, you're giving them an awareness of it, and you're moving it. And so it takes those barriers away and takes away those restrictions.
Yeah. So basically, for phobia, we have to take people to safety. They have to feel safe.
It has to be about, and that's when I said, when you take them up to that projection screen, what I forgot to say was they're totally safe. If you convince a client that they're fully in control and they're safe and they've got choice, because that's what they're seeking. Because fear is the opposite of that. Fear, but what we want is to give people, they're looking for a level of certainty. So if we give them that and give them that safety, and then that might help just open that awareness as well, because they're relaxed. We discussed last week sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system. So if your heart's going at a rapid rate, etc., you're still too much in your head. You're not in your heart space, and you're not in the right place. So by saying to the client, well, you're in control, you can stop this, you've got that level of safety, you're automatically starting to open that door for them. They've got to walk through the door, because as you said, Sudi, and that was such a relevant point, with that awareness becomes a responsibility. So the client to take the things forward that we do, as much as we're invested in the outcome, we can only hold the client's hand so far. Then they've got to take that action. But hopefully, once we've given them that different way of viewing things and given them a different lens to look at, they'll want to be, and they'll be motivated to take action. But fear, this is one thing to take away. I think people, you'll have heard the phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be, if you feel that unsafe, it's your body is telling you that for a reason. So there is a certain element to that where, yeah, because you know the zones, we need to move out of our comfort zone, but we have to go through the fear zone before we get into our learning zone and our growth zone. But our body might have a perfectly valid reason for not doing something. You wouldn't jump out of an aeroplane without a parachute. So, you know, if you said to somebody, oh, well, okay, then this is what we're going to do. So there has to be a certain responsibility when we look at fear, etc. as well, and how we portray that and how we guide our clients through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said, Alison. It was lovely having you. Would you like to join me next Thursday with another topic?
If you would, I would love to. I would love to. If you are happy to have me and the people are gaining something and they're getting a value, I would absolutely love that. Has anybody got a topic in mind, or have you got a suggestion that you would like to look at next week?
I'm gonna have I'm gonna have everyone to leave a comment for us to see what they want to know about or learn about for next week. So that would be great, and we will let you know.
That would be fantastic. So thank you, Sudi. Thank you, everybody. Time is really precious. So thank you for everybody. And hopefully people have gained something and taken something away today, that they do have control. They can master their emotions. And they've got the ability to do that with some guidance, help, and support.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you, love. I'm going to end this live. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week again.
Okay, take care, Sudi. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, everyone, for being here. We're going to see you guys next Thursday. So you need to write a comments on what topics would you guys like to talk about, and then we're going to do that for next Thursday. Also, for those of you who wish to have receive a gift, if you subscribe on my English YouTube channel, Sudi Burnett English, you can receive a gift, guys. It could be a file or one of my many courses. So don't forget, YouTube channel Sudi Burnett English, subscribe, like, comments, and shares. And also, what else I wanted to say? Yeah, that's about it. Write the comments. What would you like to know about next week, so we can talk about that. Yes, for DM Mershad for private coaching session. I saw Rosanna, psychologist, shamanism. I was wondering, Rosanna, what do you mean exactly that you put a title of psychologist and shamanism? If you can DM me what you mean exactly, why have you chosen that title? Because I believe shamanism is not something that we should take very lightly. We really have to. It's not something that we like to hear, or we think that it's a trend. We should get into it. We should really have respect, a lot of respect for shamans, and how someone becomes a shaman and their years of experience and all that. So I would like to know why you have chosen the to add up to your bio, psychologist and shamans. Thank you. Okay, so everyone, have a blessed, lovely day, and I'll see you guys next Thursday. Bye bye now.